G'day legends. Here's 5 Trigger 2 tips and tricks. Tip number 1, optimizing your settings for the best results. There's a couple of ways to set up Trigger 2. The quickest way is to duplicate your track and add Trigger 2 to it. The second way is to load Trigger 2 directly onto the sound that you're triggering off. That way you can use the mix knob to blend between the original sound and the triggered sound. And the third option is we set up Trigger 2 on an auxiliary send. So to set it up this way, we still need to duplicate the track that we want to trigger. And we want to turn this all the way down. And then off of this channel, we're now going to create a send. We're going to use bus 2, and that's set up for our snare trigger. Make sure you change the send to pre-fader, and then boost the volume to 100%. Make sure it's a stereo send and load up a stereo instance of Trigger 2. Once you've had a look through the browser and picked out some samples that you like, come back to the triggering window and let's dial this in. I've chosen snare 7. So one of those snares was a little bit soft, so we need to boost the input volume to make sure that all of our hits are fairly even sounding. Next what you want to do is bring the detail down to make sure that we pick up all of the drum sounds. Okay, so you can see when we bring it too low, we start to get all these miss triggers, and since there's no ghost noting in this track, let's bring the detail up to avoid any misfires. We can play with the low cut and the high cut filter to really dial this in to make sure that we don't get any misfires on frequencies that are outside of the range of what we're trying to trigger. So we can pull back the high cut to easily around 6K. Then we can bring the low cut up to around 200 Hertz. So the bleed's much lower. That means that we can bring our detail down further without the risk of getting extra triggers. Next, let's check out the sensitivity. So you can see when the sensitivity is too low, it misses important things like here we have a flam. It's only getting one hit. If we boost this up a little bit further, we get both hits. So getting that sensitivity just right is really important. The re-trigger knob is really important if you're getting double hits. As we turn this knob up, it doesn't allow any triggers to happen for a certain amount of time after the first trigger. It allows up to 100 milliseconds, but you have to be careful because if there's things like flams, it won't allow the flam to trigger. So we only got one hit again. Let's loop this until we find the sweet spot. Around 20 milliseconds. So that's why dialing each of these parameters in helps to get this just right. Tip number 2, using the leakage suppression to further avoid misfired triggers. This is where things are going to get a little bit technical. So let's say that some bleed from the toms is causing the snare to misfire and trigger on a tom hit. We can use the leakage suppression to clean this up. To be able to do this, we need to pan the signal that we're triggering, so our snare drum, to the left of the auxiliary. And then we need to pan anything that we want to suppress to the right-hand side of the auxiliary. So let's come back to our snare channel that we're sending to the auxiliary. In Logic, we need to click on the send and change it to independent pan. Then we need to come down to sends on fader. So now we can pan our send over to the left. As you can see up here, only on the left. I'm going to come over to our toms, tom 1 and tom 2. We're going to send these to bus 2 as well. We'll do pre-fader, boost them up 100%, and then we're going to put them into independent pan as well. So let's pan them all the way over to the right. So now as this plays back, I'm going to turn up the suppression and watch what happens. So this is telling Trigger 2 not to fire any samples when those red signals are coming through. So that means we could lower our detail right down now. You see that? That's a kick. So let's do the same thing with our kick. Let's send this in. So I can have that detail all the way down at the bottom and I'm not getting any misfires from the kicks and the toms. That's pretty awesome. A little technical to set up, but an amazing trick. Tip number 3, if you're blending samples with live drums to get the best results, you need to play with the tuning of the samples. So this is what our rack tom sounds like. Now this is what our sample sounds like. They blend together nicely. That's because I've pulled the tuning down to -33. Make sure you click link tune, and that means when you play with one of these, it's going to affect all of them. Pan one of your sounds to the left and one of your sounds to the right so you can hear the pitch of each really easily. Let's set this back to 0. Hear how ugly that sounded? So if your sample's too high, start pulling the pitch down. You can do the exact same thing for your kicks and snares as well. Tip number 4, using the built-in gate to remove bleed when blending in our original signal with our Trigger 2 samples. So you can hear there's a bit of bleed going on. So let's turn this gate on, put the attack to the fastest, and then play with the release. Now we can dial in the mix knob. Having that blend with the original signal makes it sound a little bit more organic, but the samples are still making it sound massive. Tip number 5, make sure you check out the different articulations that you can choose from. So you can see at the moment, we're on snare full, which is actually a top and center hit. And then when we go to snare rim shot, it's actually when the drummer hits the stick flat on the rim and the center of the snare and gets that really loud cracking sound. You can hear they hit a little bit harder, snare soft. Let's see what that sounds like. It's always worth checking out the articulations and seeing what's available. If you don't own Trigger 2 and you want to check it out, there's a link in the description below. Hope you guys found this helpful. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you want to support this channel, check out the description link below. Head over to my website, grab a mixing course or a sample pack. Any of that is a massive support for the time it goes into making content like this. Hope you found these tips helpful. Catch you in the next one.